Hi, I'm Jeff Harrington, and today we're going to talk about interviewing. Let's get started. When you're first practicing your interviews at home, I always recommend making a list of 10 things or 5 to 10 things that the interviewer needs to know about you, regardless of what they ask you. Of course, you're going to answer the questions, but if you can pre plan out your content of things you want to talk about, then no matter what they ask you, you can hopefully pivot and change your stories to meet their need. For example, if I'm applying for a teaching job, I would probably want to make sure I talk about my student teaching experience, assuming I had that. And a lot of times when we're interviewing, we forget about the most basic or obvious things on our resume, but it's really important to talk about what you've done in great detail, specifically and intentionally. Maybe you were a club advisor, or you did some internships, or maybe you're bilingual and speak another language. This is huge. So many people forget that they also happen to speak Mandarin or Spanish or fill in the blank. And that skill set of being bilingual is definitely something you can talk about as a interviewee, regardless of the job you're applying to. Whether you are a part-time job in college, or you have a cool story about a conflict with a coworker, or you're involved in an after-school program, or maybe you have some specific industry involvement, regardless of the industry you're applying to, that have some really cool transferable skills. This list is essential for you to really drive the interview the way that you want it to be directed. So instead of me waiting for the interviewer to ask questions, I'm already preparing content that I want them to know about me before I even walk in the room. That's a really helpful piece. So after you've listed the 10 things or a handful of things that you need the employer to know about you, your degree, your experiences, your characteristics, then we're doing some district research or some company research. If we're applying to a school district, we might be looking up that school district website, talking about the services that are offered, or their mission statement, or their description on EdJoin, or whatever that search tool was that we found that job. I'm a big fan of looking up really specific things like annual reports, or for schools, they have what they call an accountability report card. PTA meeting notes. Look at their Facebook. Look at their Google searches. Like just kind of see what's out there about that company. That way you can connect your experiences with what you know about the company and really kind of hone your answers to meet the needs of that employer. That's huge. And then when you get in that room, a lot of people want to practice interview questions, but there are infinite interview questions. There's no way I can tell you what that interviewer is going to ask, because sometimes they don't know until right beforehand, to be totally honest. So I would suggest focus on categories of questions, not so much the question itself. So I can not guarantee you, but I can assume you're going to get a question about who you are. Tell me about yourself. Tell me about your background, your timeline, your work history, and why you're here today. Like that's a very common intro question that you're probably going to get. You're probably going to get a question about why do you want to work here? Or if you don't get that exact question, you'll get a version of that question that might come out in an interview of why us. You will probably get some sort of question about your strengths, or your weaknesses, things you're good at in relation to that position you're applying to, or things that you struggle with that are authentic things you struggle with, and not how it's a strength, but how you're working on it to get better at it. I want to know that you are a reflective person. Additionally, question number 5, or category number 5, is one of my favorites, where you're probably going to question about diversity, or your level of empathy, or your emotional response, or how do you actually utilize your emotional intelligence. That question comes in all forms or fashions. Question number 6 is, how do you handle conflict? And oftentimes, we're going to go into detail about this one in just a second, you'll get a question about conflict, and you're like, I don't know how I handle conflict. But this is perfect. On your list of 10, if you have a conflict story and how you resolved it, this is a great time to add that into your list of 10 things you want to talk about. Your organization, your level of customer service approach. You could be applying for a full-time position after graduation, or a part-time position at a local grocery store, and your level of customer service approach, you could have learned as a referee, as a 13-year-old referee in youth soccer. You could have learned how to deal with angry parents, or how to deal with different types of people in the world. And that's how we can start to hone your customer service approach. How you solve problems, and then how you lead other people. Whether it's in a campus club, or an organization, or a leadership experience where you're volunteering in the community, there are a ton of ways in which you can describe these 10 categories and pull from your experiences. Because whether you have full-time experience or part-time experience, or for some of you who think that you have no experience, which is not true, you definitely have experience, we can start to craft and hone your answers to these questions. So if we look back at number 6, we can kind of figure out how you handle conflict. These are questions. I'm going to give you 4 or 5 questions so you can dive into what this question might look like in an interview. But think about how you handle conflict and maybe a story you have and how you might recraft that narrative to fit each one of these next pieces. For example, you might get a question, these are specifically for teachers once again, but a question about like, can you give me an example of a problem you've had with a teacher, coworker, client, and how you've resolved it? You might get a question about, tell me about a time you've had to successfully deal with a student, a coworker, a client that you didn't respect, and kind of how that played out. That could be a conflict question, that could be an emotional intelligence question. So you can pull from this list of things you've already prepared. Tell me about an experience where you've dealt with an upset parent, coworker, client, customer, patron. Just about every industry, someone's going to be upset with either you or a process. This is a great time to pull that story out. And the 4th example in this is, tell me about a time you've had to make an unpopular decision, whether that's in your classroom, whether that is in a work setting or whatnot. What you're trying to do is pull stories and experiences that you can pivot to any question that comes your way. So if you are going to an interview, all in all, I'd suggest that you pull a list of things that you're good at. So your list of 10 things that you want to talk about. You practice these top 10 interview categories. And then if you really want, I'd suggest making a practice interview with us, because that way we can help you kind of hone and craft your answers. And we do that via handshake. So go ahead and make that appointment today. And you and I can talk, or you can meet with your advisor, and we can dive into all the fun stuff it is to do a practice interview. All right, once again, my name is Jeff. I look forward to seeing you soon.